Hi everybody and welcome to another Heel Heat Top 10. My name is George Coles. This is my tag team partner, Jim Neidhart. They're going to tell me your real name eventually.
Gary Rhodes. Everybody, Gary Rhodes. I just had to be a smart ass. Jim Neidhart, really?
Well, 15 minutes of silence. Way to get people watching our show, Gary.
Better listen you talk, George.
This week our top 10 is going to be focused on one of the great wrestling promotions of the past, WCW.
The wrestling people.
Now, this is our top 10 wrestlers in WCW, and I'll let you go ahead and start it off.
Well, number 10 is one of my favorites of all time. I know he's one of yours too. ECW original, Raven. I think this guy here, his character was way beyond its time. And I think if they would have gave him the ball and let him roll with it, I think it would have been a huge character. Would you agree?
Oh, I definitely agree, especially if you remember the video game they put out. I think it was WCW Revenge for Nintendo 64. It had Hogan, Nash, and Raven on the cover.
And the thing is, I think a lot of politics between Nash, probably Hogan, the rest of the NWO really worked against the Flock, because back then the Flock was really over.
Yeah, between that and his drug use, of course, but
yeah,
he's a guy, he gets lost in time. I consider Raven the link. There's a wrestling pretty much follows the same general cycles. I consider Raven the next evolution of Jake the Snake Roberts, and I consider CM Punk now the next evolution of Raven.
See, you think right now if Raven was clean and everything like that, and he was Punk's age, he would be on top of Vince's food chain?
Yeah, definitely.
I think so too. The guy, number one, was a great storyteller in the ring.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
He was tremendous. And our next guy, number 9, was great for totally other reasons. Scotty Steiner. When you talk about WCW, one of the first things that comes up is the Steiner brothers, which for the most part during his run, he was part of the tag team. Probably WCW's most successful tag team, them and Harlem Heat. But Scotty broke out of the Steiner brothers, became Big Papa Pump, joined the NWO, and went on to become a multiple-time world champion there.
The one thing I loved about Steiner is he was a shit talker. Literally, he was a shit talker, but he was shitty at doing it, but it was just so good. His promos were just priceless, man.
His pipe bombs were like...
For real. If he didn't like somebody, they knew it.
His pipe bombs were more like C4, where if you touched it wrong, it exploded in a way you didn't want to.
I remember the one promo we cut on Flair. Oof. But anyways, right after that, we're going to mention another members, actually. We have a tie for number 8 between Hall and Nash. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. Two of the guys that really turned WCW's fortunes around and actually brought them to their riches.
Yeah. And also they were kind of the part that led to the downfall, exactly. Because they had the favored nations contract, where if you don't know what that means, when they signed their contract, in their contract it's both of them said anyone that gets hired with a higher pay raise, we automatically get bumped up above their pay rate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the spending in WCW started snowballing and pretty much putting them out of business.
So they got a big bump when Bret Hart came in there. That's probably why they were pushing for Hart so much, because I think he got, $3 million
something like that
for 2 years.
And the reason why we're putting them in here together is because in WCW, their careers are just linked together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in WWE, they were separate. They were Diesel and Razor, and they did separate stuff in WCW, but there's so much together that we put them in as one.
Well, them coming in together really changed, like I said, changed the fortune of the company.
Yeah.
It turned it towards the end, but really, no one took WCW serious until Hall and Nash came out there and got rid of the kid gimmicks.
Yeah, exactly. But coming off of that, another guy that was a steal from WWF was our number 7 guy, Randy the Macho Man Savage. Probably one of the greatest wrestlers of all times, total package-wise. He was great on the mic, great in the ring. He was a great face, a great heel. Anything you asked a guy to do, he could do. probably one of the most athletic guys that's ever been in the business, too.
Also, probably one of the most mocked guys in the business compared to some of these guys nowadays.
Yeah.
D. Bryan, Punk, both idolized a guy. You could just tell by the way they work.
I mean, Punk incorporates a Macho Man elbow off the top rope as a respect to him, and Jay Lethal had a whole run in TNA based on the Black Machismo, which was a Macho Man gimmick.
And our number 6 competitor, wrestler, I'm sorry, after this.
Superstar?
No, these are wrestlers. You hold your fingers up.
Because it's a wrestling show.
They're the wrestling guys. If you hold your 4 fingers up, you know who I'm talking about. Double A Arn Anderson.
He's double tough.
Double ready. And this guy here was the backbone of the original WCW. I mean, he's the one that ushered in from NWA to WCW. And really, between him and the rest of his factions, whichever ones he worked with, I mean, you get the Horsemen, Dangerous Alliance. What was the other one he had? He was in Parker's crew, the Stud Stable.
Yeah, the Tennessee Stud Stable.
Yeah. I mean, the guy was always a star maker. If you put him with somebody, you made a star. If you put him against somebody, you made a star. One of the best of all time.
And just like he said during his retirement speech, he might not have had the best look, he might not have been the best in the ring, but every time he went out there, the fans knew they were getting the best of Arn Anderson, and it showed.
Oh yeah, the dude had a lot of passion.
Yeah. After that, we're speaking of passion, our number 5 guy solely makes this list based on his passion. Diamond Dallas Page. He's a guy that started off in the business rather late in his life. I think he was 35 before he even got trained.
Something like that.
And he started off as a manager in the AWA, came over to WCW in a similar role, and just worked with guys, continued to work after matches to learn the ropes, to finally get a start. Started off low on the card with actually Scott Hall and Kevin Nash as the Diamond Stud in what was a Hall at the time, Big Sky or something.
The Wizard.
No, he was Nash was Vinny Vegas by then.
Yeah. They had so many shit gimmicks.
And Hall was Diamond Stud.
The
that's
Diamond
what it
Stud.
was.
That's it. Yeah.
I had it backwards. But he kind of managed those guys, and managed Raven as Scotty Flamingo too, where he gradually worked his way in with a feud with Johnny B. Bad, Mark Marrow, and built his way all the way up to being a world champion there. The guy's passion for the business is unquestioned. He's kind of that generation Zack Ryder, in my opinion, because Zack Ryder's a guy that is not accepting no for an answer, and I absolutely love that about him. Love that about DDP, and that's why we have him so high on our list.
Our number 4 wrestler was one of the best tag team wrestlers of all time in WCW. He had a few runs in WWE later on in his career, but he was also a five-time WCW champion.
Actually, isn't he 6-time because he won it once with WWE?
Well, no, that was his 5th with WWE, but the one he won with against Batista was his 6th championship. He was a 6-time world champion, 5-time WCW champion. But he's held almost every belt in the WWF or WWE.
WCW too. He had the TV title, the US title.
If they were to give him the WWE title, he would actually be the only person to ever hold every title ever existed between the two companies, except for the cruiserweight. But
he's just not a cruiserweight.
Exactly.
Did he get a hardcore? He didn't have a hardcore title.
I think he did a hardcore title.
Did he?
Everybody
did at some point.
And he had it in WWE too. But one of the best guys in the business, him and his brother Stevie Ray were one of the best tag teams they made. Brought them up when they first came in. They came in as a main event in not World War III. What is it, the Battle Cage, Double Cage?
The Wrestle War.
Yeah.
War Games.
War Games. Yes.
The match beyond.
They debuted in that War Games with Sid against the Shockmaster and Davey Boy and the rest of them guys. But anyways, one of the best of all time.
And speaking of that era, our number 3 guy is one of the true monsters of WCW. One of the best big men in the history of the business, Big Van Vader. The guy from the time he burst onto the American scene was a star. I mean, he came in and you believed his gimmick, you believed he was a tough son of a bitch.
And he was too, man. I mean, Vader is actually one of my top favorite big men of all times. The guy was huge, he could wrestle, he was agile, and he was just a bad son of a bitch. He made it look believable. If he had someone beating him in a corner, it looked like he was really just tearing them up in a corner.
Plus, he had some really classic matches in WCW. Feuds with Sting, feuds with Cactus Jack, Mick Foley. Took his ear on accident.
Yeah,
it wasn't on purpose.
Yeah.
And also, he had one of the Flair retirements at one of the Starrcade, which the match itself was. Remember that Flair's career was up for it, and Flair ended up winning, I think, his 13th title or whatever it was at the time. But the match itself was great. I mean, Flair and Vader worked an awesome match. The guy was just money in there.
Well, number 2 comes a man that we actually just mentioned. The franchise, pardon the expression, for the WCW brand, Sting. This guy, I would say, would be a legend, but the only thing that keeps him from being an icon is working for Vince McMahon.
Yeah, his career is, in my opinion, held back from the fact he's never went to Vince. Not saying that he hasn't had a historic Hall of Fame worthy career, but the guy really should have went to Vince. The match that everybody wants to see, even to this day, is Sting versus The Undertaker. And at some point, it's starting to get to the point where he can't work as well, and it would look ridiculous now. So there's no point in it.
But like he said, I mean, the man back in his time, Ric Flair made him, and the guy solidified his skills in the ring. I mean,
yeah.
I honestly think if he were more heel, he'd probably be one of the best of all time.
You know what I really liked about Sting? I liked that he switched from the Surfer gimmick to the Crow gimmick. He even rolled with the punches when they wanted him to be in the Wolfpack. But I really liked the fact that he would go in there and put the guys that none of the other guys would want to put over. You didn't see a Hulk Hogan putting over Vampiro.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't see Flair putting over Cactus Jack. And he would go out there and do this with these guys and make them stars so he had other guys to work with.
Now, before we get to number 1, we're going to do the best of the rest. My first choice for best of the rest would be Ron Simmons, first African-American World Heavyweight Champion. Enough said right there.
And these are the guys that just barely made it off the list.
Yes.
This would be 11 on no particular order. A guy I want to talk about is the Giant, a guy that Big Show Paul White won the WCW Championship his first night there, and he was tremendous there. He had, I think 2 or 3 runs in actual WCW. And, I mean, he was everything from, he was part of the Dungeon Doom, the NWO.
WCW by itself.
Yeah.
Next guy I'd like to say would Next guy I would say he's been in the company back and forth between them and Vince, Sid. Either if you want to call him Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, Psycho Sid. This man here always put on a great match, whoever he worked with.
He was just a head case in the back.
Yes.
Another guy.
Scissor Sid.
Another guy that is someone that they highlighted as the flagship of their cruiserweight division, which was one of the things that brought you on to Nitro, Rey Mysterio Jr. at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy, I mean, say what you will about him now, if you didn't see Rey Mysterio back, I would say from 96 to about 2000, when he was in his absolute peak, the guy was tremendous. He was coming out on Nitro with a brand new move every week.
Oh, yeah. Our next guy, speaking of guys that had moves, Eddie Guerrero. Also a great Spanish wrestler, Mexican wrestler, whatever you want to call him. But the luchador. And he was a little bit bigger than most of them, so he could do the American style and the lucha style. And I think he really incorporated it great in his career. Too bad he's gone.
And he was a guy that didn't get to break the glass ceiling, which brings up our next guy that's one of the best of the rest, Chris Benoit. He didn't get to break the glass ceiling till the night before he decided he was leaving WCW, and they tried to give him the world title to keep him to stay. But it was obvious to anybody watching the show that Chris Benoit was one of the hugest talents on the show.
Regardless of whatever happened afterwards.
Yeah.
And right now, I want to say 2 guys that were there, big parts of the company, had good separate careers there, but I'll put them together in this because they were my favorite WCW tag team, the Hollywood Blondes, Pillman and Austin. The two of the greatest wrestlers of all time in a tag team. If you would have put them together now, if Pillman was still alive, you'd have a mega team.
Yeah. And speaking of Pillman, then he was a 4 horseman, which leads us to our number 1 guy. The guy that most associates with the 4 horsemen, even more so than Arn Anderson, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. the greatest WCW competitor, in my opinion. When you think of WCW, this is the first guy that you see in your head. You see him holding the big belt, the real world championship.
Woo! You know what's funny is I've seen a picture of Flair when he was a real world champion in WWE. And
Holding
the
tag
team title. That's just crazy.
That's when they digitalized it.
Yeah.
Because he actually sent the belt back.
Yes.
At that point. So they used a digitalization because they were under threat of being sued.
Mm-hmm.
And he held up one of the tag titles. It's good stuff. It's funny. I think it was a Survivor Series at that. I've seen that picture.
Yeah. But the good thing about Flair is, actually Flair's only downfall is Flair doesn't realize he's Flair.
Exactly. Flair is probably the greatest wrestler of all time. Flair didn't seem that he ever said no to anybody. I mean, he let guys like Rico go over on him.
One thing, if I had the book and I was with WCW and I've been with WCW forever, when I hired Hogan in,
Flair would have beat him.
Flair should have went over on him, at least the first time. That's just my opinion.
And if you look at it, when you think about WCW, they tried to make Hogan the face of the company, but no one thinks Hogan WCW. They think Ric Flair. Ric Flair is WCW through and through. I mean, no matter how disenfranchised he got with it by the end, he's the guy that you associate with WCW more than anybody. Him and Sting, but I put Flair just above Sting because Flair's the man, and to be the man,
you got to beat the man.
There you go.
Well, that's our top 10 list on the WCW. You got anything else to add?
I think that's pretty much all we have for that.
Thanks, Sophie.
Well, wait, before we do go, if you guys have anything that if you think we put them in the wrong order, if you think there's somebody we left off the list, let us know what you think about it. Put it down in our comments down where?
Down there.
And go ahead and do the bad thing. I swear, it's Abe Knuckleball Schwartz I'm working with, guys.
Thanks, Goon.
But let us know what you think. If you think we left somebody out, if you think we got the order wrong, if you don't think Flair's number one, you think someone else should be number one. If you think there's a guy that we don't even have on the list, just let us know what you think, and we'll be happy to talk about it with you guys. And pretty much that's all I got on that.
That's it.
My name's George Coles.
I'm Gary Rhodes.
And this has been another Heel Heat Top 10.